The scream came first. Sharp, urgent, like someone had just watched their last hope crash to the ground. Damn it. The woman's voice echoed across the misty farmland, slicing through the cold morning like a whip. Tyler had just pulled over on the gravel road outside her fence, wiping the sweat off his brow. His beat-up old truck coughed out steam behind him like it was on its last breath, just like him. He wasn't supposed to stop. Not today. Not when he was already late to drop off flyers for his small repair business that barely paid the rent. But something about that cry, it wasn't fear. It was something else. Desperation. He squinted past the rising sun and saw her, mud on her jeans, one boot half off, her hands gripping a snapped wooden beam like she could put it back together with pure rage. And behind her, the wreckage. A barn, no, a piece of history, had collapsed halfway in, its roof caved, doors hanging loose, hay spilling like guts from a wounded animal. Horses whinnied inside, still trapped. Tyler slammed the truck door shut, forgot about the flyers, and sprinted through the fence gate. "Hey, you all right?" he yelled, boots crunching through wet gravel. The woman didn't look up. She was too busy trying to yank a beam off a terrified mare's flank. Her arms shook, jaw clenched, and a silent scream sat in her throat like a powder keg about to blow. "I said, are you? Help me or leave," she snapped without looking, her voice coated in grit and grief. So he did the only thing that made sense. He dropped to his knees and shoved the beam up with everything he had. Together, they moved like a machine. No words, no names, just two strangers in a storm of broken wood, blood, and breath. Tyler's arms burned. Her lip bled from biting it too hard, and by the time they pulled the last horse out, the barn looked like it had fought a war. She collapsed to the dirt, not from weakness, but from weight, of everything, of keeping it together for too long. "Thank you," she said finally, barely a whisper. Tyler sat beside her, chest heaving, hands trembling. "You almost got crushed in there." "I didn't care," she admitted, wiping sweat from her brow with a bloodied sleeve. "That barn was all I had left." Tyler looked around. The land was beautiful but tired. Fences sagged. Crops barely clung to the soil. It wasn't a farm anymore. It was a battlefield, and she was its last soldier. He stood up and offered her a hand. "I'm Tyler," he said, "and I fix things." She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "Maeve," she replied, "I ruined them." That was the first time she smiled. Crooked, bittersweet, like someone who'd stopped believing kindness could show up for free. "You didn't have to stop," she added quietly. "I've been the one screaming before," Tyler said. "Nobody came then. So now I do." Maeve looked away, her jaw twitching. "This place, it was my mom's. After she passed, I tried to keep it alive. But it's drowning. I'm drowning." He nodded slowly. "Let me help you fix it. No charge." Her head snapped toward him. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." He smiled, not because he could afford to, but because he couldn't afford not to. Because someone's got to start being decent. Might as well be me. And for the first time in months, Maeve let out a real breath. One that didn't taste like failure. She didn't know it yet, but her past, hidden under layers of secrets, shame, and silence, was about to crack wide open. And Tyler, the broke single dad with nothing but calloused hands and a bruised heart, was about to be pulled into a world he never thought he'd touch. Not fame, not fortune, but truth. And what came next would shatter everything. The next morning, Tyler was back at the broken-down barn before the dew had dried on the grass. His truck wheezed up the dirt path like it didn't want to be awake either, but he killed the engine with a grunt and grabbed his toolbox. His son, Noah, sat beside him in the passenger seat, legs swinging. 8 years old, too smart for his own good, too quiet, too observant, and too used to watching his father give more than he had. "Is this the place?" Noah asked, eyeing the splintered beams and rusted hinges with the same look he used when studying a puzzle he couldn't solve. Tyler nodded. "Yup. She needs a new roof, reinforced joints, probably some fresh fencing, and about 10 miracles." Noah frowned. "And we're doing it for free." Tyler looked at his son, really looked, and then ruffled his hair. "Yeah, because sometimes, son, we help people not because they can pay, but because they're bleeding." Maeve was already outside. Her jeans were stiff from yesterday's mud, her eyes darker from lack of sleep. But she stood straighter today, like someone who'd seen a flicker of light in a cave and wasn't ready to let it go just yet. You brought backup, she said, nodding to Noah. Tyler smiled. My supervisor. He keeps me honest. Noah offers a small wave, and Maeve, after a pause, actually smiled back. Over the next 6 hours, they worked in silence, then in short sentences, then, eventually in stories. Maeve talked about her mother, about how this land once smelled like bread and lavender, how music used to echo through the open windows every Sunday, how her father left one night and never came back, how she tried to turn the barn into a horse therapy center for disabled kids, but the funding dried up and the town looked away. Tyler told her about the divorce, about how Noah's mom chased bigger dreams and forgot they existed, about sleeping in the truck for 2 months, about doing odd jobs just to keep Noah in school, even if his shoes had duct tape on the soles. By the time the sun dipped low, the barn had a new skeleton, stronger, cleaner, hopeful. Maeve brought them lemonade in chipped mason jars. I don't know how to say thank you, she said, voice low. Tyler looked at the barn, then back at her. You don't need to. Just don't give up. But something flickered behind Maeve's eyes, like she'd been waiting for someone to say that. And now that they had, it almost hurt more. As they packed up, Noah tugged on Tyler's sleeve. Dad, her shoes don't match. Tyler blinked. What? Look. Noah pointed discreetly. Maeve's boots were scuffed, old, and mismatched. One leather, one rubber. Both soaked from the fields. But what caught Tyler's attention wasn't the boots. It was the way she flinched when she noticed them too. Like a wound reopened. That night, back in their one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, Tyler stared at the ceiling while Noah slept beside him. He couldn't shake it. The barn, the desperation, the silence in Maeve's eyes. Like she was hiding more than just a broken barn. And she was. Because Maeve wasn't who she said she was. And tomorrow, the first truth would unravel, starting with a stranger in a black SUV who'd been watching the property from a hill. But that night, in the quiet, Tyler whispered to himself, kindness doesn't cost much, but sometimes it changes everything. He had no idea how true that would be. Maeve didn't hear the SUV. It pulled in just after sunrise, slow and deliberate, tires crunching over gravel like the land itself wanted to warn her. She was inside the house, washing dirt from her arms when the knock came. 3 sharp raps against the worn screen door. She froze, not because she feared danger, but because she knew exactly who it would be. Tyler had arrived just minutes before. He was crouched by the barn, marking beam placements with chalk when he noticed it, sleek, black, and out of place. He watched as a tall man in a pressed charcoal suit stepped out, sunglasses still on, his posture straight enough to cut glass. Maeve walked to the porch slowly, as if every step took her 10 years back. Her hands shook slightly, just enough for Tyler to notice from across the field. The man didn't say hello. Your silence is louder than ever, Maeve, he said coldly. You've ignored 12 messages. Tyler instinctively moved closer, pretending to measure a wall. Maeve's jaw tightened. Because I have nothing to say. You have everything to say, especially when you're hiding out here like you're broke. Tyler's eyes narrowed. Hiding? The man stepped forward. Your father's legal team is circling. They know you rejected the trust. They know you left it all. But now you're playing charity farmer? Do you really think that'll fix anything? Tyler felt a jolt in his chest. Trust? Legal teams? What the hell was going on here? Maeve's voice cracked, but not from weakness. From restraint. Get off my land. The man sighed like someone dealing with a stubborn child. You're the heiress to one of the largest agricultural conglomerates in the country, Maeve. You think you can outrun that by playing peasant? The world doesn't work that way. Tyler's stomach dropped. He watched her flinch, fists clenched so hard her nails dug into her palm. Leave, she said again, low and dangerous. The man stepped down from the porch, brushing invisible dust off his blazer. When you're done playing games, come back to the table. Your name still holds power. Or it did, before you let this dump swallow you. He drove off, tires spinning dust into the air like smoke after a gunshot. Maeve stood frozen for a full minute, then turned, saw Tyler, realized he'd heard everything. She didn't say anything, but her eyes said too much. That night, Tyler didn't sleep. He sat on his truck bed beneath the stars, trying to process what he'd seen. She's rich? No, she was rich. That guy said she left it all behind. But why? Why would anyone trade a billionaire life for a crumbling barn and broken boots? He didn't know what shook him more, the lie, or how much it didn't change how he felt. Because Maeve didn't act like a spoiled heiress. She worked with blood on her sleeves and pain in her lungs. She didn't look down on him, even when she easily could have. And that made it worse, because it meant her pain was real, and it meant the world had done something awful to make her run. The next morning, he confronted her, not with anger, with quiet, firm truth. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said, setting his toolbox down. "But if I'm helping build your future, I deserve to know what I'm stepping into." Maeve's lips trembled. Her voice barely held. "My father controls everything. The land, the money, the company. And when my mother got sick and wanted to turn the business into something better, something that actually helped people, he buried her idea. And when I backed her, he cut me out." She wiped a tear roughly. "So I left. Gave up the inheritance. The lawyers called it stupid. My brother called it a phase. But I was done being a pawn." Tyler stepped closer. "So you started over." Maeve laughed bitterly. "I tried. But starting over doesn't come with instructions. I failed. Again and again. I came here because this place was hers. It's all I have of her." She looked up at him, broken but brave. "And now you're here, fixing it. And I don't know why." Tyler didn't flinch. "Because someone should have helped you a long time ago." He didn't care about her money. He cared that she'd been abandoned, just like he had, just like his son had. And in that moment, Maeve finally let go of the breath she'd been holding for years. But fate wasn't done. Because later that day, while rebuilding the north wall, a fire broke out in the shed. Deliberate. Gasoline. And beside the smoldering ruin, a white card with her family's corporate logo scrawled across it. Maeve's past wasn't done with her. And now Tyler was caught in it too. The flames were nearly out by the time Tyler smothered the last of them with a torn tarp and buckets of well water. His arms were burned raw with ash and heat. The air still choked of smoke. Maeve stood frozen near the barn, staring at the scorched black frame of her tool shed, her face pale. But it wasn't the fire that stole her breath. It was the card, a clean, ivory-white square that sat neatly where the fire had started, like a calling card. Black ink, one word in all caps. Correct. In the corner, embossed in gold, her family's company seal. Tyler picked it up, brows furrowed. "What the hell is this?" Maeve's voice came out like broken glass. "It's a message." Tyler looked at her, waiting. She swallowed hard. "They know I'm rebuilding. They know you're helping me. And they don't like it." Tyler's jaw clenched. "Your father did this." Not directly. He'd never get his hands dirty. But he has people, contractors, shell companies. He sees this place as a failed asset. "The longer I hold it, the more it devalues the brand." Her voice shook with disgust. "They want to burn, buried, erased." Tyler stared at the charred rubble. He thought about his son, about kindness, about how many times he had swallowed his own pain because there was no one around to help him carry it. And then he looked at Maeve. She was trembling, her eyes brimming, but she didn't cry. She just stood there, silent, like she'd stood in front of destruction 100 times before and just expected the world to keep tearing her down. "Not this time." "No," Tyler said, voice low and thick. "No more running. No more letting them scare you." Maeve blinked. "You don't understand." "I don't need to," he said. "But I've been broken before. I watched my world collapse, just like this. And no one was there to help me rebuild. I'm not letting you face this alone." She turned away, tears finally spilling. "I didn't ask you to. I chose to," Tyler snapped, stepping forward. "Just like you chose to walk away from all that money and power. That took guts. That took heart." Maeve looked at him like she'd never been spoken to like that before. "You don't owe me anything," Tyler said, gentler now. "But I'm not going anywhere. Not until this place stands again. Not until they know they can't scare you back into silence." There was a long pause. The wind whistled through broken boards. And then, quietly, Maeve said, "Then let's rebuild. Together." Over the next week, something shifted. Maeve stopped flinching at every engine sound. Tyler installed security cameras using parts salvaged from old jobs. They worked day and night, framing new support beams, hauling stone, repainting what could be saved. Noah helped too, sweeping, fetching water, planting new seeds Maeve had nearly thrown away last spring in a moment of despair. They didn't talk about the fire, but they talked about everything else. Late one evening, while Noah napped inside and stars bloomed across the sky, Maeve told Tyler the real reason she left the family fortune. It wasn't just about my mom, she whispered. It was about who I was becoming. Cold, efficient, ruthless. I was turning into my father without even realizing it. She looked down at her hands. Then one day, I visited a small town he bought out. He'd fired everyone, bulldozed homes to build his new complex. There was this girl, 8 years old, sitting on a box of her things in the middle of a dirt road, crying. Maeve's voice cracked. She looked just like me. Tyler swallowed hard. So you walked away. I thought I could start over, be someone better, but I didn't expect it to hurt so much. Tyler took a deep breath. Growth always hurts. She looked at him. What about you? Why do you give so much when you've had so little? He shrugged. Because Noah's watching, and I want him to grow up believing kindness still matters. That night, Maeve placed a hand gently over Tyler's scarred knuckles. No words, just quiet understanding between two people trying to build something that had been taken from them too many times. But peace didn't last long. 3 nights later, someone broke into the barn. Not to steal, to destroy. The hay was soaked in acid. The walls were slashed. A single photo of Maeve's mother, once framed above the stall, was left shredded on the floor. Tyler stared at the chaos with clenched fists. This was no longer about control. It was war, and Maeve wasn't the only one with something to fight for anymore. Tyler didn't sleep. Not a second. The acid stung his nose even after the barn had been cleared. The horses had been moved. The tools were gone. Maeve sat on the steps of her porch, a blanket around her shoulders, still staring at the wreckage like it was the body of someone she loved. Tyler stood at the edge of the property, fists clenched, a storm in his chest. Enough. Enough silence. Enough fear. No more building what others could burn. This time, he would end it. The next morning, Tyler dropped Noah at his sister's house across town. He didn't explain, just kissed his son on the head, told him he'd be back soon, and drove. He didn't know exactly where Maeve's father lived, but he knew the building, the tower with the company name on top. A monument to arrogance, money, and the cold-blooded control that had ruined a daughter's life. Security tried to stop him in the lobby. He didn't let them. He took the elevator to the 47th floor, stormed past a stunned receptionist, and burst through the door to the office. Behind a massive desk sat Grant Langston, calm as ever, fingers steepled in front of his chin. Tyler didn't wait for permission. You came on her land, he growled. You sent people to destroy her barn. You vandalized her mother's photo. And you left a child sleeping in fear. Grant didn't flinch. And you are someone who gives a damn when you don't. Grant chuckled. The handyman. The stray she picked up. Tyler stepped forward. You know the difference between us? You own skyscrapers, but I fix what people actually need. Homes. Shelters. Trust. And Maeve? She's worth more than this entire empire. Grant raised a brow. Then why did she run? Because she chose integrity over inheritance. And that makes her dangerous to men like you. The room fell silent. Grant stood slowly, walked to the window. You know what happens to people who stand in my way. Tyler stepped beside him. They either fall, or they build something you can't tear down. Back on the farm, Maeve got a call from her father's legal team. You're no longer under corporate threat, they said. The company is backing off. Maeve stared at her phone like it was haunted. Why? Because someone walked into the lion's den for you. Her hand shook as she ended the call. Tyler returned that afternoon, dirt on his shirt, sweat on his face, and nothing in his expression that said, I won. Maeve met him halfway across the field. You did that, she whispered. He didn't answer. He just looked at her, then finally said, You shouldn't have to keep running from a man who never knew what it meant to raise you. Maeve broke down in his arms. The next weeks were slow, but steady. The barn was rebuilt, again, stronger, reinforced with steel, painted white and deep red, like Maeve remembered from her childhood. Word spread in the nearby towns. People came to help, not because she was rich. No one knew. They came because they heard what happened. They heard about the girl who gave up billions to save a farm, and the man who helped her rebuild it for free. One day, a couple brought their disabled son to the new horse center. Maeve showed him how to hold the reins, how to feel the rhythm of something bigger, something alive. When the boy smiled, Maeve looked at Tyler, and Tyler saw her, truly saw her. A woman reborn, not a runaway heiress, but a builder, a healer, a fighter. Months passed. Maeve opened an equine therapy nonprofit. Tyler became its official repairman and co-founder. They hosted weekend clinics for at-risk youth. Even Noah started helping out, leading pony rides and making kids laugh. Then one evening, as the sun painted the horizon orange and gold, Tyler found Maeve sitting on the porch, staring at the barn. "You still think you ruined things?" he asked gently. Maeve smiled, tears catching in her lashes. "No, not anymore." He stepped beside her, hesitant. I want to build something more." She looked up. "Like what?" He swallowed hard. "Us, if you'll let me." Maeve stood, walked to him, took his hand. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." 1 year later, the barn was filled with laughter. Kids, families, horses trotting in slow circles, the scent of hay and cinnamon in the air. A banner read, "Langston Meadows Annual Community Day." Maeve had reclaimed her name, but on her terms. She didn't take the money. She didn't return to the empire. But she made sure every acre of her land stood as a symbol of healing, of kindness, of strength. And beside her stood the man who helped her rise from ashes not once, but twice. Tyler, who had nothing to give except heart. And in the end, that was everything.